upping your life and moving to a new part of the world is a tale as old as time. In fact, some studies show that it all began nearly 2 million years ago when some early humans, feeling adventurous, left Africa and overstayed their tourist visas in Eurasia. #YOLO. Last year, it's estimated that 184 million people lived outside the country they were born in. But why? Well, I'm Rob Orme.
And I'm Chris Russell.
And we want to know why people uproot their lives and move to a new part of the world. We want to explore what impacts the decision has to leave, not only on their lives, but also the ones that they love and care for the most. This is Here and Eire.
Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Here and Eire, a podcast about why we leave. Roberto, how are you?
Hello, Christopher. Mate, I'm so good. And I'll tell you why I'm good. I know we said that we wouldn't start every podcast talking about the weather, but let me just tell you, the weather down here at Lake Bondi has been nothing short of exemplary. It's easy for me to say. I would also further like to add that I was very honoured to listen to the interview that you conducted with my mother in Somerset a few weeks ago, and I brought a little tear to my eye. It was very emotionally charged. You said some really nice things, or maybe she did. I don't know. It got confusing, but I'm not very good with compliments. But I just wanted to say thank you to you for going down there. I think Mum really enjoyed it, and thanks for interviewing her. And we'll look forward to sharing that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it was fun. I went down, and we'll do a proper intro for it at some point. But I went down for a lovely weekend down in Somerset. I rode my motorbike down. Was looked after very well by your mum and her husband Graham, who we had lots of chats. We went down to the allotment. Your mum overfed me. I rolled back up to London afterwards. It was really good, and the weather was beautiful. I mean, we have to talk about the weather. The weather was fantastic. I actually got sunburned down there. It was great. But
You might be the first person ever to get sunburnt in Somerset.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There was 1 hour or 2 hours of sunshine that were just like really intense.
Fantastic.
But no, that's a good episode. I think we'll probably that'll be, I think, next week or the week after. But
And how have you been, mate?
now I've been good. Just actually, I keep saying mate. So I had just sidebar story here. I had a friend of mine over from Ireland recently. His name is Pascal, not Pascal, Pascal. And he's from Donegal. And he said to me, can you stop saying mate? We were out for beers, and he just stopped me. He said, "Can you stop saying mate?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Mate is what English people say, and that's what Australians say. And you're not English or Australian, you're Irish, so stop saying mate." This episode is dedicated to our good mate Pascal from Donegal.
Pascal, mate, this is for you.
See, it's okay. He doesn't mind you saying it. It's more me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. I think that makes more sense.
But yeah, things are good in the UK. We had the big old. The big news last week was Kamala and Joe.
Yeah, of course.
Donald.
That's this week. That's in our lifetime.
I mean, there was a lot going on.
It's hard to keep your finger on the pulse with these things, isn't it?
Well, honest to God. So, from somebody not being able to shoot straight to Joe just kicking the bucket there and calling it a day, to Kamala basically owning the brat race as it now is. We're not in America, and I'm not American, but it's hard to stay out of that pot. It's hard to kind of not keep your eye on what's happening over there. I mean, look, you don't want to wish ill on anybody, and someone died, and you kind of, those sorts of things are not good for democracy. But one thing I chuckled afterwards was when he appeared at the RNC, and I don't know if this video is real or not, or if it was like doctored afterwards. But when he was walking along at the RNC, like literally the next day, I think it was, and they were playing 50 Cent's Many Men wish death upon me as he's walking along. And
well, I think he stole that from 50 Cent, because 50 Cent put up a graphic of Donald at his gig.
Look, the thing is, you never know what's real and what's not real on the internet. So it could be content, it could be a fake video, but I was just like, it did make me chuckle because that would be very much in his wheelhouse. But then, I mean, I watched some, Joe, he's gone. He's had enough. Old Irish Joe from County Mayo, apparently. Um, we love Joe Biden in Ireland. Just there are people who have made careers from the fact that they are slightly, in some way, shape, or form, related to Joe Biden.
Is that right?
Yeah, we do. We love America in Ireland. It's to a slightly embarrassing stage at some points. But yeah,
Does
there are a
one of
couple of people
those
around.
embarrassing points include allowing big, large American conglomerates to pitch up in your backyard and not pay any tax?
No, that's just smart business, man. That's just smart business.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I did coming from Ireland's version of Elon Musk. I'll take that with a pinch of salt.
The office block next to where I work, it's the new Google building.
Yeah.
And this thing, it's called a side scraper. So it's basically as long as the shard is high. It's absolutely huge. It uses more steel than the shard, and it's Google's new building. And I haven't been to the Google office in Dublin, but I imagine it's an apartment. It's a one bed apartment. That's their European headquarters, just
Yeah.
for tax purposes.
It's a
But
cupboard.
no, yeah, we're pretty far. But forget about Joe pulling out. Forget about Trumpy being shot.
Yeah.
Kamala, oh, she is owning it. She's everywhere. Energy, excitement. She's a brat. I don't even know what a brat is, but she's a brat. Charlie XCX, I think. Was it Charlie XCX?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't even know what a brat. You don't even know what a brat is. You've been
So out of the
done.
loop with this. To educate me.
I don't know what, mate. I don't know what brat is. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's something to do with Charlie XCX. I think it's the name of her album. And Kamala has adopted the coloring and the rebrand, has kind of rebranded herself to the point where Charlie XCX is like, you're a brat. Now, I'm 36. You're nearly 40.
Whoa! Don't age shame me on my own podcast.
I'm not. I'm not age shaming you. I'm just saying. I'm just laying out here the rules here. We're not Gen Z. I don't understand it, but they understand it and they seem to enjoy it.
I'll tell you how much I don't understand it. Is Charlie XCX any relation to the XX?
I don't know what the XX is. That's how old you are.
Yeah, you would. You'd know their albums. You would.
Name one song.
I can't right off the top of my head, but they had that black album with the X's, and then they did follow up one with the white. But come on, you're in the music biz. I ask you the questions.
I might work in
the XX. You must know the XX. This is embarrassing for you.
As all of my colleagues will tell you, I know nothing about music.
Yeah. We just like having you around, Chris.
Just the accent. You're just here for the accent, really.
It's just the accent. And we don't know what you're saying half the time, so it's even more comedy.
Just do a little dance. Go on.
Do a little dance. Put on the jacket, Chris.
Fun stuff. So yeah, it's all going. The US is an interesting place. I mean, it'll dominate all the headlines for the next 6 months, 4 months?
No, November is when we go to the polls.
Is that not 4 months?
August, September, October.
Let's not embarrass ourselves with our lack. We've already embarrassed ourselves with our lack of knowledge.
I've got to count it out. I'm not very good at mental month counting.
But sure, look, shall we let's stop waffling and let's give the people what they want.
Okay, mate. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about who we're interviewing this week?
Would you like me to tell you a little bit about who we're interviewing this week?
I would love for you to tell us a little bit about who you're interviewing this week.
So, mate, we got Katy on the show today. So, Katy's originally from Bristol in the UK, moved out to Australia about 8 years ago. Spent a good chunk of time there, living the dream on the beach, having a great time. But last year decided to move back to the UK, moved back kind of similar time to me, actually. She is a really interesting character, teaches reformer Pilates. She's an actor, she's a TV presenter. And I think she has a really interesting story to tell. I won't tell you too much about it. We'll let her do the talking.
Well, wonderful. Let's get tucked into it.
Oh, hello, Katy. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. I know we've been trying to get this in the diary for a few weeks.
Yeah, I know. Finally made it happen.
And Rob, unfortunately, Rob is the reason we're doing it on Zoom rather than me popping
Yeah,
out to say hello to you. And Rob's not here, so that's good of him to mess that up.
I know. But the joys of technology. We can we can connect, make it happen.
It is pretty good. Look, let's just start at the beginning. I think tell me a little, just maybe give me kind of the overview of your immigration, traveling on the world journey.
So basically when I was 27, I was living in London, working in London, wasn't particularly happy with my life at that point in terms of didn't love my job, felt very stressed, felt like I was constantly living my life underground on the tubes. And, I just I'd always been quite interested in living abroad, living somewhere, but never kind of thought mentally I could do it. And I don't know why. I think it was just kind of a bit rigid in my thinking, I suppose. And yeah, I came to a point where I was like, okay, well, I could leave my job and get a slightly different job, but still in the same area, or I could do something bigger. And basically, that something bigger came from I had a friend who I used to work with years ago, and she was then living in Sydney, had moved there, and she would come back kind of once a year for a visit to England. She always looked really glowing, and she said, "Oh, it's so great. Everyone wears active wear and goes for brunches." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I want some of this. Like, I think I need something like this in my life." So that was where the something bigger was planted in my head. And that thought kind of grew. And it took quite a long time, I think about 6 months of just privately kind of thinking about it and researching and yeah, kind of planning. And then I was like, right, yeah, I'm gonna go because I didn't want to look back. 80-year-old Katy didn't want to look back and say, why did you not go and do that? Because you could just stay here, but you know what here is like you know what that's going to look like. But this could be the chance for a really big adventure, and you don't have any ties right now, so now's the time to go. So I basically saved a bit of money and got a one-way ticket to Sydney. And I'd only been there once. When I was 19, I went traveling around Asia and a little bit of Australia and New Zealand. So I think I went to Sydney for a few days. So I really didn't know what I was going in for.
Had you
Um,
had you any inkling to travel abroad before this, or was this the kind of
to be
moment?
honest, well, as I said, when I was 19, I sort of inadvertently went traveling because I wanted to go to drama school, didn't get in, and then had to apply for unis, separate story. But so I had to kind of take a gap year and worked, and then had some friends that were going traveling, and I'd never really felt the massive appeal to do that. Um, and I think when I realized when I was doing that, I was like, I don't really enjoy the traveling around part of it, like these like long buses and the so tiring and going from place to place. But I liked the idea of making somewhere my home and living in another country. I think that's always been appealing to me. But as I say, I just couldn't visualize how to do that. And actually, on that point, there were some Aussie girls living in London at that time that were friends with one of my friends, separate Aussie girls, and they were living here. And I remember saying to them like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do something like that," and they were like, "Yeah, you can. Like we're doing it." So I think it was a few little people, well, different people saying things that kind of helped to break my rigid mindset and sort of think, okay, this is possible for me. Like I could make this happen.
It's
Uh,
hard when you only know what you know, right? And
yeah, exactly.
you need some outside influence. I mean, Rob and I kind of have spoken about this previously. but we were both influenced by other people to travel abroad at the first time. You know, I think he had an Australian girlfriend. I actually had a girlfriend who was Irish but had gone to university in Scotland and had kind of gone, that's actually a thing you can just go and do. So you kind
Yeah,
of you only know what you know until you have some kind of outside influence to actually inspire. I think is probably just the right kind of terminology, or at least kind of break down the barriers that you've built up within your own brain.
I know, because the brains are so powerful and sort of locking you in and thinking this is the only way that's possible. And then you can actually, there are many other different roads, but sometimes it's about, yeah, changing that mindset, or like you say, having people to inspire you, and people like you that have done it, that make it then feel possible for you to do it.
100%.
So yeah, when I sort of said, to some people I think it sounded quite out the blue, but for me I'd been thinking about it for quite a few months. And then just before I went, I remember I suddenly got quite scared and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going into? Because I didn't really know anyone there.
Tell me about so I mean look, tell me about when you did the move and the kind of the next step of actually you've overcome the fear and you've
Yeah,
jumped
so
on a plane.
and then I was working in public relations at the time, and I thought, well, I just always trusted that I get some sort of job, so that for some reason didn't worry me as much. I mean, I think I was a bit more kind of cavalier in some ways. I didn't have that much savings. Like now I think about what I went over with, it wasn't very much. But yeah, I just I spoke to the girl that was living there, and she gave me a lot of advice on like practical things like visas and banks and Medicare and things like that. So she gave me some practical advice. And then I remember I started reaching out to recruitment agents like ahead of time. And then I had organized, I was going to Airbnb her friend's room, this one contact that I knew, for like the first 2 weeks in Bondi, and that was it. So that was it. And then I arrived, and I remember it was like October here and October there, and obviously it's summer there. So I arrived and I saw like the Bondi beach, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't just want to stay a year. I just want to stay here forever. um, and then yeah, I guess like it wasn't the easiest few weeks, but things did fall into place. I managed to I met one of my who ended up being one of my really close friends like about a week later on Bondi Beach, and I ended up Airbnb her place where she was going to leave and move on. So then I got another few weeks, and then I managed to find somewhere to live, to rent, and then I got a job. So things did come together, I guess relatively quickly. But yeah, just a bit of trust, I suppose.
And how was your kind of your energy levels? Okay, you talked about kind of being in London and the underground and not being connected almost to kind of the outside world because that's how London is. You're underground and you're in high rises. How did moving to a beachside place like Bondi, how did that kind of impact your energy initially, or were you on a high because it was a new experience anyway?
I think I was very much on a high because it was a new experience and it was so different.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, I mean, the main thing was, yeah, having all the light and the sky and the sunshine. And it was very novel for like quite a long time to have that. It is such a novelty when you haven't experienced that before. I mean, to be honest, I actually only lived near the beach for the first 2 weeks, funnily enough. And then whole rest of my time in Sydney, I didn't live right on the beach, which is
Where were
just
you,
so.
where'd you live?
Well, I moved to Bellevue after Bondi, then I lived in Bellevue Hill for a
Okay.
little bit. So kind of near to the Bondi Junction side. Then I lived in Randwick for a while, and then the longest place I lived was Edgecliff,
Okay, cool.
um, near Paddington. Yeah, near
Yeah.
Rushcutters Park. So I really liked it, but it's funny enough, it's sort of very similar to where I live now. Similar to where I used to live in London. So I basically just found the same sort of place. So I didn't actually end up really living right on the beach.
Yeah, it's funny when I went out because I lived in Randwick and Bellevue Hill as well eventually.
Yeah.
But I started out in Waterloo,
Oh,
um, and then moved to because I had friends there, so I just kind of moved in with some mates.
well,
Then moved over to Erskineville, in the inner west, which I loved. Erskine was a brilliant little kind of fun place. But there was a part of me when I was there and I was like, oh, do you know what? I don't know if I'm going to stay here forever. And if I don't, then I don't want to go back. And having lived in Erskineville, which is basically, it could be a nice place in Dublin, it could be a nice place in London. Like
Yeah, I was gonna say it's basically very
doesn't feel
city.
very Australian. It doesn't feel very Australian. So we moved to Randwick, and that was kind of close to the beach, and then Bellevue Hill was kind of close to the beach, and then I ended up in Manly before coming back. But really kind of jumped around all these places
Mm.
to try and find that kind of. I think you do need a bit of that beach side, even if if you're able to dip your toe into it. You don't have to be there kind of fully. But I always felt like it's nice to be adjacent. And Edgecliff is good because
Yeah.
you've got the harbour.
Yeah. So I used to be able to walk, I think it was about like a 20-minute walk to that beach near Double Bay, Redleaf, which is
Yeah.
the heart of the beach, and go swimming. So yeah, it was kind of, I felt like it was close enough. I mean, I didn't feel like I needed to be right on the beach because it's quite far away then from getting around everywhere else, was what I found.
Yeah, I think Edgecliff is always a good one because you got the train there as well, so
Yeah, and the
you can kind
park,
of do.
it was just quiet and like outside the little bubbles of, Bondi bubble,
Yeah,
Manly bubble.
you can dip in and dip out.
Yeah,
Um, so you've landed, you've settled a job. So how long were you in Australia?
8 years in total.
Okay, cool. And did you automatically feel settled? Like how did that kind of
No, no, I didn't. I arrived and I thought, yes, I definitely want to stay longer than a year because I had a working holiday years visa. So I had no specific plan. I hadn't gone thinking I just want to stay and move here forever. I'd just gone really just to break up my life and have an adventure and just basically see where it took me. So I left it quite open, which was really good actually, because I think some people um they sort of think they really want one scenario and that gets quite hard with visas and things like that. Whereas I just left it open to say, well, whatever will kind of be will be. But yeah, I remember the first year it was quite hard because I did get a job, but I didn't love it. And then I remember coming to a point where I was going to leave and they would have sponsored me, but I had this question where I was like, well, do I want to do a job where I've done it in London where I really am so unhappy? And I don't want to put myself through that again. Like promised myself that I'd never do that. So I thought, even though I'm in Australia, I remember sitting on the beach talking to my friends, being so upset, saying it's so beautiful here, but I'm really not happy. So there
yeah.
was like a crossroads where I thought, well, I'm going to leave and maybe I'll just temp for the rest of the 6 months and maybe that'll be it. And maybe then I'll just come back and I'll just have had this great year. But I ended up revisiting a job that they hadn't had anything initially, but then they did have something and they would sponsor. So it was almost like weirdly fates aligned in a very strange way. And yeah, so I got that job and then I ended up working there and then I did get sponsored. But again, didn't know if I could definitely get PR. So there was many times where it was a bit up and down. The visa thing was quite stressful. I did feel quite locked in to that job. Um, and I mean, separately to that, I must admit, I I did always wonder in my head, I was like, I really like it here, but I did always think, but am I going to be here forever? Like, I didn't ever know where I fully assimilated into the culture of Australia.
Yeah. I think that's
Liked it, but yeah, culturally, there was something that was a bit disconnected for me, and I just kind of didn't delve into that until obviously it got bigger and bigger over time.
I think that question mark of I always think with expats, that question of am I staying here forever is always on your radar. Like everybody in Australia, I've lived in Dubai as well. It was always that question: how long are you staying for? You know, I'm in the UK now, and I'm not from here. So even in my head, I'm like, oh, how long am I staying here for? I think that's just I don't know. I feel like that's a thing that is it's just you're out of your comfort zone to a certain extent. And it's always a question mark, I think expats ask themselves. And I'm always amazed when I meet people who are like, no, this is me for life. I'm set for life.
Yeah, same. Because I've had a few people that they really did settle and they're there and I don't know, maybe they met people and things like that, which made it a bit different. I mean, I guess that changes your scenario. If you do meet someone, maybe you have children, things like that. But yeah, it always amazes me as well, because I'm like, how are you so sure about that? Like, how do you just know? Because I never had that feeling. And I day to day really liked it because it was so easy and lovely, but I definitely didn't, or I definitely never thought, no, I'm going to definitely be here forever. There was always that, yeah, there was always slightly that kind of, what's the word? Yeah, just guess slight disconnect.
And is that so? You said that was kind of culturally, but what does that mean? Is it?
Yeah, I think just you know, Australian culture is quite different to England, I would say. Like similar in some ways, but it is quite different. So I mean, my friends were generally mostly expats. I didn't really have very many, definitely not Sydney friends generally. And my Australian friends were generally from people that had moved into Sydney. I did have a couple of Sydney friends, but it was a little bit harder there in Sydney. It can be quite cliquey, I would say. Um, and yeah, so I had lots of expat friends, but then over the years, kind of people then would leave and you sort of lost that sense of community. And I just would sometimes feel like a kind of balloon floating around, like, where are my roots? Sorry, I'm diverging off the question here, but yeah, I suppose like, oh, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, when you've grown up in England, you don't think, oh, the culturally it would be so different, but I guess it is really, because it's just things that you've grown up with, small things like the schooling systems and relatable points, like, you know, GCSEs and, you know, different exams, and it's just these small things that when you talk to people it is different. um and yeah, just it's kind of a slightly different manner of being, I would say. Like Aussies are a bit more laid back and things like that, which is true. And yeah.
I think it's So before I moved, I was in London 8 years ago or 9 years ago now, and then I left and I went to Dubai before going to Australia. And one thing that I always struggled with, because I always think London, in fact, actually, I think I read it on Time Out or somewhere. I read it somewhere that London and Sydney were like top two of the hardest places to make friends. I think it was the headline was very unflattering. It was like unfriendliest cities or something like that. But basically, that idea that there is a clique, and I would agree in Sydney. I think there definitely is a clique, and the only reason I would say I have friends who are Australian are because A, of work, people I worked with, and then people that they introduced me to. But if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have, all my friends will be expats. Um, I think London's slightly similar. It definitely was.
Very friendly.
But so you're from here. Okay, so that's
Yeah,
the
maybe.
difference.
Yeah, I'm not from London though, but I am from England. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always found London really hard because I mean, literally, I've done two stints. This is my third stint in London now. And the first two found it really, really hard to make friends with people, to kind of get into groups, unless you kind of had to put yourself out and do something. So I had to go play hockey. I had to go play sport. I had to go kind of actively go and do stuff, to try and kind of like get in with friends. But even my flatmates and stuff, like they were from uni and they were kind of they were mates that way. But the one thing that I always got was Sunday afternoons were always the worst for me back in the day, because Sunday afternoons was when everybody went to their parents' house. And you talk about not kind of having roots. I always found Sundays were the worst, because I was just floating around London on my own, and struggling to kind of go, oh, it'd be just great to nip home and, hang out in my mum's house. So roots are I agree, roots are kind of a hard thing. And I think, to go back to that point about contentment and people who are, this is me for life, they've probably done a better job at getting those roots, whether it's through partners or through kind of um relationships they have in Australia. I always found that those people were kind of fairly content in their own world because they had those roots that were there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think like maybe if you had, you know, if you did have a partner there, or if you had some sort of family, because I had no family out there, but even if you had like an uncle or an aunt or someone, a brother or a sister, I think that starts to make the difference. because it just gives you a little bit more of that, yeah, community rooted feeling. But when you haven't got any of that, it's difficult. And yeah, I know what you mean. I think anywhere in any city, like when it's a big city, you have to put yourself out there. I think the difference I find in London, it's more of a melting pot. So there's people from all over Europe, like so many different ages. Whereas I felt with Sydney, it was much smaller, and it was kind of like everyone knew each other from school, and people weren't really from, obviously you do have expats, so that's different. But it's not as kind of this big melting pot of all different people, whereas I feel like London is. So I don't know, that's the difference, I feel.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Come here, I'll ask you. Tell me about in the 8 years. Tell me how the relationship with family and friends back home. How did they survive? How did they not survive? How did
Well,
they
they were
go?
always really supportive, so I feel really lucky because they always said, yes, go and do it. And my mom was so happy because I was so stressed in London at that point, so she was so happy for me to go and have that experience. And I always just, I mean, the joys of technology, just kept in contact via, you know, WhatsApp and voice notes and video calls. I think it got harder because I've got two nephews and a niece, and another one on the way now. So that got harder. That's when it started to get harder, when like little people come in and you don't get that time back, and then just feeling like, oh no, I'm just, I don't want to be this absent aunt this other side of the world. And so when those changes started to happen, it did make it harder. And yeah, I think it was, I still feel like, just to say, I still had that close relationship. I think the difference was, like you were saying, like I couldn't just ever pop back. Like, if you're having a hard time, you can't just sort of like be like, oh, I'll just nip on that 24-hour flight and you know. Whereas here, for example, like I can just easily go back to Bristol, and it is just, I could just be there in like a few hours if I wanted to. So that's really nice because you feel like there are just many more people around that you could, yeah, fall back on.
Did you go home much? Did people come out and visit you much?
I went home about once a year. Sometimes I went home twice. I think one year I went home twice, maybe. Um, and yeah, my mum and my younger brother came to visit me over one Christmas, which was really nice. Then it got a bit harder for people because, as I say, they've got kids and things like that. So I understand it's not easy. Like, it's a big trip and it's a lot of expense and a lot of time that you have to take. So, it's not easy for people just to come out and visit. So yeah, I think the distance, it would have been so different if it was in Europe. It would have been so different.
Well, this is it. I mean, I love Australia. Like, genuinely, hand on heart, I think it's brilliant. For me, it's it's brilliant. It's outdoorsy, it's blue skies, it's down the beach. It's very, very me. But I really struggled with how far away it is in time zone, in distance. And I think I kind of made my peace with it, in terms of going, right, look, I have a fund over here. If I need to get back for some reason, whatever it may be, for an emergency, I can. But then COVID came, and that kind of escalated for me all of that kind of period of time, because you couldn't come back. Well, you could come back, but you couldn't go back to Australia. And it was just, I didn't come back for 3 years. But even I've noticed back here now, I'm going to Ireland this weekend. I'm going home to work at home for a week. I'm working from home for a week, so time zones don't change. I've done little like 24-hour pop-ins. I flew home on a Saturday afternoon, flew back on a Sunday afternoon, said hello to everybody, and you just, I feel like I'm much more connected in that sense. And it's actually really enjoyable. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much when I first moved back, but I've really been enjoying it. I think it's really great.
Yeah, I love that feeling as well. Like, I've been to Amsterdam to see like my brother and my nephews, and I could just take a long weekend, and then yeah, as I say, being able to go to like visit a friend in Northern Ireland, and then the weekend after going to Exeter, and like, you know, being able to go visit people anytime, just being able to, you know, as I say, pop back to see family and not having to be this big thing that I've got to plan. That's the other thing. And because I'm freelance, I have to take all that time out, you know, not earning like 3 weeks, which almost you get back and you're like, well, I almost don't need this much time. And then that became like my holiday, because that's what had to be my holiday time. Then it wasn't really a holiday per se. So then I felt like I was missing out on also doing all these other little trips. So yeah, whereas now I feel like, oh, I can see more places and I can do these little trips, and it's not such a big outlay of time and money and resources.
It's exactly true. So I need to ask you, we did a bit on our research department. You told me you were an actress.
Oh yeah.
So you were in 10 Pound Poms, is that right?
Oh yeah, I had a little part in that, just a small couple of lines.
That show is basically this, right? It's that kind of premise of people going
Yeah.
out to Australia, the 10 Pound Poms, which is famous for it. So basically, it was like you booked a 10 pound journey to Australia, and they had all these hardships, and a lot of people kind of came back after a period of time. Did you? I mean, I don't know how acting works. Okay, so I don't know if you kind of get the full kind of broad view of a show when you turn up, or you just turn up and do your lines. But was that kind of, were you when you were kind of asked to be in this, or you were contemplating being in the show? Did this idea of did any of the kind of the storyline resonate with you in terms of your experience in Australia?
I actually didn't really know. I didn't end up watching the series because I just ended up getting upgraded on the day. So basically, yeah, just ended up being like, right, got the director was like, gave me some lines, and then suddenly I was in it, and this is what happens. It's all like fly by your seat. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Um, so no, I didn't actually end up watching the whole series, but I mean, yeah, I just think it's funny, I suppose, like back in the day, that would have been really hard because you wouldn't have had any technology or anything. So you just sort of went out, not really knowing anything, and then probably going on boat for weeks to get there.
I mean, I remember when I landed in Sydney, I WhatsApped my mum. I think I was in arrivals in the airport. Said, "Hey, I'm in Australia,"
Yeah.
and it was so easy. And I've heard stories of people who have. There was a story of a priest in our hometown back in like the 60s, back when Ireland used to export priests, because that's how fucking good at priests we were. We'd send them all around the world. And apparently he got told he was being sent to England, and he told his family he was going to England, said goodbye to them in the house, said he'd send a letter when he arrived in Dublin to get the boat, and was told he was actually going to Australia. Didn't have time to communicate and ended up on a boat for 3 or 4 months, whatever. And then it took another 3 months for a letter to get back to Ireland to let the family know. And so they all thought he was dead. They thought he'd gone to London, he'd been killed because it took so long.
Wow. I mean, I don't think I could have done it. Like, I remember when I was 19 and traveling, and I remember using a payphone to call home and going into internet cafes, because this was before, like, you know, smartphones. So I remember doing that and like emailing people. And then you'd have this conversation and be like, oh my gosh, I spoke to my mum on the phone. Um, and it felt much more disconnected. So I don't think I could have done it. There's no way I could have been there 8 years if it hadn't been for technology, because just you would have felt so cut off. I would have felt so cut off. So I couldn't have done that. It was technology that made it um doable. I think, because it does brings you closer.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because I kind of it's a bit of a debate. I'm reading a book at the moment about a guy who in the 1970s traveled around the world on a motorbike. So he spent 4 years traveling around Africa. He would rise into Africa, he goes to South America, goes to Australia, all around the world. Um, and he has no way of communicating with home. He's sending telexes. I don't even know what telex is, but something called a telex. No idea. I feel like it's Morse code in some way. I feel like it's a little kind of
Right.
strip of text. That's what I think it might be. And he's sending letters. but he has no direct contact with home and with family. And it's just kind of being adventurous. I've sat with the idea going, geez, you know what, I'd love to do that. I'd love to just fucking sit in the motorbike for 4 years and travel around the world. But obviously I'd be connected because there's still social media and my phone, and it's much easier to be connected now. And I can't tell if that adds to it and makes it, you know, being connected to family and being connected to everybody is good in that sense, or does it kind of take you out of the experience a little bit? You know, he's kind of been thrust into this space where he has no option but to be there and be in it and be in the moment. And I can't tell if technology has kind of would add to it or would take away. And I think that's Australia as well. Like, I can't tell if I was there and it was just letters, would that have made it, you know, would I have engaged? I mean, I engaged pretty heavily, but would I have thought about coming as home as much? Or would I have just kind of invested myself really in the moment?
I think I definitely invested myself in Australia because it was so far that even though I was connected via messages, it still feels there is that separation. Well, I felt that separation because there's a time difference, and you know, it's just a message. I wasn't always speaking to them all the time. So it still felt for me that there was that separation. I was just kind of out on my own. And also not being able to just pop back, like I had to make everything work myself. So if it went wrong, like I just had to make sure I was okay. So I did feel very much on my own at times, which was a good and a bad thing. Yeah. Whereas coming back here, I'm like, oh, okay, I've got people around me that could help actually if I needed it. Whereas I didn't have that there, and that did get a bit hard sometimes.
So how long have you been back, and what was the catalyst for that?
So I came back January 24th, I think, and then I was in Bristol for a few weeks, then moved to London in February, so depths of winter. So it was a hard few months. Definitely a rocky few months. And then I think when it got to May, I started to finally feel settled, I would say. When May came, I just don't know what it was. Combination of just, yeah, the weather's, there was some nice sunny days. Obviously, the clocks went back. That was a big change. And yeah, I just started to catch up with more friends here. I do feel like there's lots more people around that I can arrange to see, like old friends, people that I knew in Australia that have moved back. So a lot of people moved back as well. So that was the other reason I started to have not that many people left in Sydney. And yeah, coming back here, I'm like, oh, there's lots of people around, and they're probably not just gonna move. They're probably not just gonna leave.
But it gets harder, doesn't it? With the older you get, it actually, I mean, it does get
Yeah.
harder to kind of uproot your life and move.
Yeah, so sort of you think, okay, people will be around, like people are here. And there's more people here. So that feels like a nice feeling. But yeah, sort of May I started to feel settled and just a bit more grounded and things, and just more like, okay, this is where I am, this is where I'm living, because it was definitely a culture shock and lots of small things that you don't even realize. Um, and yeah, you like the weather at first was really hard, but then you know, you do get used to it. Um, and yeah, but it takes a while. It does take
What were those small things? What were the things you kind of moved back and
small things, like as in logistical things, like because I moved, you know, I thought, oh, it'll just be a copy and paste from Sydney to London, but no, it's like a brand new thing. Like I haven't lived in London for years, so a new area, like getting used to the transport. Oh, I also teach reformist pilates, so different studios, I had to get used to all that. It's like not the same, different style of teaching, like just all these little things that you just don't really factor in. You know, it was I was having a brand new life. It wasn't like I was just coming back into an old life. It's a brand new chapter. And I just hadn't quite appreciated that, I guess, as much. But then I started to think, oh no, this is not, I'm just translating my life from Sydney. No, this is a whole new, brand new life. It's not the same. That chapter is done. And this is a new chapter.
and did that chapter kind of closing the door, did that come straight away, or was that kind of part of the settling period that you talk about?
Yeah, I think still a settling period. And obviously I have moments where I'm like, oh yeah, Sydney. oh, there's some things about it that were really easy, but I just sort of know that for right now, I do feel like I'm in the right place. I could just sort of think that, yeah, it had sort of completed for me. So obviously I have moments or days where I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to have like go to the beach or have a sunny day, but it's just that moment. It's not like, oh, would I want to live there? It's like, oh, it'd be nice to have a day by the beach, but you know, the living there is different. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think my mum said to me, like, you'll never, if you ever live in another country, a part of you will always, that will be a part of you forever. So, of course, you'll have days where you're like, oh, Sydney, oh, yeah, Sydney, that was nice. Maybe I could live there again. But of course, you'd have that because you're always going to have these two countries. And I lived there for 8 years. So that's never just going to go. And that's a really nice thing to have that. But yeah, I guess it's just, you know, inside you often kind of know where you're supposed to be, like it's just an intuitive thing. And I just feel that I'm getting some deeper things coming back that I wasn't getting in Sydney, basically. I got a lot of surface level things. I didn't get some deeper nourishing things. And you know, it's easy, like quick hits in Sydney, like, oh my God, yeah, the weather, great, blue sky. Yeah, that's a really quick serotonin hit. Like, oh, I can go to the beach. What I don't have is like my family's right there, all the people around me, roots of where I grew up, you know, certain things about English culture. I don't have that. So it's no, I wouldn't say like, you know, there's pros and cons about anywhere. It's not like one place is better than the other. But yeah, I think it's depends where you're at in your life. And I guess I was looking for some deeper, that at this point in my life, I'm looking for some deeper, different things, that deeper feeling of like that rootedness and maybe where I'm going to be, where I can settle, connections with family. I won't get that time back again. Like I could always go back to Australia, like I could go retire there. Like I'm so lucky I've got a passport now, so I could literally retire. I could go back later in life, but I won't get the time back now with people. So that just felt more important. Yeah.
So it's actually a very nice way of looking at it, to be fair. We're gonna kind of wrap things up here. I'll give you some time back in your day, but I'm curious if you had some advice for some people who might be considering a move abroad. What would it be?
Definitely do it. Changed my life for the better. I should add, I went to Sydney and then I learned all the things about myself. So yeah, Sydney was amazing, but more what it gave me was I'm finally doing all the work I want. So I left being in PR and now I teach reformer and do acting and all this stuff on the side. But it was Sydney that gave me that because it broke me out of my old ways of thinking. And if I hadn't gone, I wouldn't have found me. So really, I went away, but just to find me. It's all inside, really. You can take yourself to any place, you're still you, but it gave me the opportunity to expand my thinking and give me so much confidence. It's so enriching. Even during what you perceive as like difficulties or bad times, even if you go for a month and you feel like it's awful and you come back, you'll have only gained. So I would always say go and do it and let everything come that's meant to come, whether that's good, the bad, the ugly, because it will only bring you deeper into yourself. Like I just don't, you will only gain from that. I think if you just stay in the same place, you won't ever grow or learn. So absolutely, like it's one of the best things I ever did. Definitely.
Katy, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to speak to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well. It was so nice and yeah, very thought-provoking.
If you like what you've heard here today, make sure you jump onto Instagram and give us a follow. We'd love to connect with you and hear all about your immigration tales. Just search for Here and Eire.
cut it there.